Surf Splendor.
Are we rolling right now?
We are officially recording and rolling. Cheers.
Cheers, David.
Thanks for making the drink.
Did you already podded today?
True. Yeah.
So we are sort of at the end of your refractory period.
The refractory is getting longer and longer these days.
You can do it twice a day, though. That's impressive.
I need a few hours in between. Chaz said hi.
All right. What did you guys talk about today?
It's funny, that show now is really outlined and produced by the listenership and the audience. People call in.
That's a great idea.
It's so good. They call in and they'll deliver some talk. Like the guy who I guess it would have been an email. No, it was a call. He was talking about he has a surf nemesis. So when he's where he surfs, there's another guy who's pretty similar quality of surfer. Because the guy who's ripping, you're not worried about that guy. He's going to he rules, Then the kook, you're not worried about. Mm-hmm. But the guy who's a pretty similar ability level, you're constantly trying to outposition. They're surfing a wave, you're watching them. And then when they kick out, you look away and you try to make sure they didn't see you watching. So he's the surf nemesis is essential because it's iron sharpening iron. You're trying to elevate. You've never had a conversation with a nemesis, but they're probably in their head assessing you the exact same way. So we had a full conversation.
There was a guy at Ocean Beach when I got there in the early '90s who, just the same way I recognize this is the guy who I want to keep my eye on, and he and I, he was the guy who on big days I go, well, maybe I didn't want to go out, but if Aug's going out, I'm going to go out because I wouldn't not let him, So it's that whole macho. And that went on for a few years, and then August started surfing Mavericks, and I just waved the white flag. So he won, and we actually became better friends at that point because he was a big wave surfer and I wasn't.
So I've had the same thing where, you acquiesce to some nemesis because you figure out they're actually better, and then other ones I trounce at a certain,
Right.
It's not just one foe.
Right.
It's
right.
every session actually I've identified a different foe sometimes.
Right.
So
it's funny about now that I surf so infrequently that when I think about why I did it for the 40 or 50 years, the way I did it with that much intensity, I sometimes forget about it's a game. But the game had so many levels to it that I was never bored. And part of it was this whole thing about coming up to a beach and knowing who I have to. It was just every team. It's you're sort of scanning the field and who do I need to think about and who can I not worry about? Who can I out paddle? Who can I cut off?
Exactly.
All that stuff. So when I was just out in Laguna right now with my wife and kid, I see guys out surfing, and there's guys out surfing and no one's getting much, and I'm not seeing. I don't see anymore all that underlying stuff that made the whole thing so fascinating. From the first day I went out surfing we'll talk about Jay Adams in a little bit when we get into it, but Jay and I were out there, and from the very first summer in '69, and he was better than me, and but I was better than the other kids, and so you're always just out there, and it was just constant maneuvering and psychological stuff, and it was all captivating enough that's again it wasn't just the riding wave. So Teddy's watching these guys surf. He goes, "Oh, that guy got a wave. That was pretty good." And I was thinking, well, that wasn't much. And then I think about all the stuff that in that guy's head would have gone into getting him to this day on this day after Thanksgiving 2024. And that's sometimes I miss all that stuff.
Do you think that's also part of the reason why you abandoned it?
I got to a point where I think at my age, it seemed like it wasn't the best use of my time.
Right. Well, that video I published from a year ago, which we salaciously titled on YouTube, "The Reason I Quit Surfing" or something like that. It has 455 comments on it as of today. And it's people enraged at the idea of quitting surfing at any point. It's some people saying I completely relate to that. A lot of people saying they found it later in life and it's been the fountain of youth for them, so they don't understand, they can't relate. But
I had a guy who loved Encyclopedia of Surfing and was telling his friends about it. He was from LA, he's a little older than me. And I must have done maybe he heard a podcast I did with you, but it was an earlier one. And he was so outraged that I talked about not surfing as much as I used to, that he just emailed, like he and I had been in email touch, and he sent me just outraged emails that he was CCing his friends who he'd recommended the site to, saying I was the real deal, and and this guy's a poser. He doesn't fucking surf anymore. He just pulled a fast one on all of us, And it was out just in really lit up, flaming all cap stuff. And I did this thing that I didn't used to be able to do, which is I just sort of talked him through. I didn't get angry. I talked him through. I said, look, I surfed every day for decades. And I hit 50, and I had a kid who was really young, and my wife got a job opportunity, and it just was time for me to slide out. And he came back with, that's no excuse, blah, blah. And I went, well, I tried. And then 2 weeks later, he sent me a $500 donation and then apologized. And he said, I'm really sorry. I thought about what you said. And he was bummed because he came to surfing later, like you're saying. And for him to be, so this was when I was about 60, he was maybe 65 or something. He has a ton of money, I guess. And for him, every day that he gets to surf at this point in his life is incredible. And he's just loves nothing more. He's got a huge family. His business is all set. And he's just living this full-on, latent, almost intermediate stage. He's been surfing for probably 25 years, but he's just in his full froth mode. And he couldn't get how I wouldn't be if I had the option. So, but when I sort of walked it through with him, and he and I for 3 years now have been just like email buddies. And I bring it up every now and then. I go, God, it was wild, man. And he goes, I know. I do that sometimes. So, good. But it's like you're saying, some people freak out when you make that admission, and then some people just go, thank you, because it was. You know who did the first article about that was who was the guy that wrote about Andy so well for Surfer? Why am I forgetting his name? Brad Malekian did the first article about people who aren't surfing anymore. He said he took a lot of shit for that too. So,
people don't get enraged unless it is holding a mirror up to their face to a certain degree. Mm-hmm. So that is their own thing that they're confronting when you speak openly about it.
Totally agree.
And so when you shared that conversation with me, I didn't think it would catch fire on the internet or anything I didn't think it was that salacious, and I could actually relate to a lot of what you were talking about. But yeah, for whatever reason, people do.
But the other funny thing is that I didn't oversell it. I did leave surfing the way I used to surf, which is I used to for 40 or 50 years. Surfing was the first thing I thought of when I got in the morning, and everything sort of fell in line behind it. Even when I was a little kid at school, can I get in the water after school? Everything fell in line. And when I got married, the same way. Even the first year Teddy was born, we were still in San Francisco. Surfing was first. When we moved to Seattle, and it was just easier to say I quit surfing, and I did. I eventually sold my boards. I decided I wasn't going to surf in cold water, but I never quit surfing. And so, since last time we talked, I've had these 2 trips that were both pretty amazing. One to Fiji that we might have talked about, and then I went to Costa Rica last May with Kevin Miller, and surfed 5 days in a row down, not at Pavones, but near Pavones. I can't think of the name we were at. And, I just was right back in not performance-wise, but realizing, remembering exactly why I liked it, why I wanted to do it, and how easy it justified. Of course I did that for all those years,
It's funny when you say I quit surfing and those people get enraged, they have no idea quitting means,
well, right,
I'm not doing it 7 days a week like I used to.
Saying you quit that is a little, I think when I say quit, that's meant to be a provocative word. I want to say, I want to go a little further than I actually have done,
But it is almost quitting compared to how much you used to do it.
But how much I used to do it wasn't necessarily healthy. It was just what I did for a long, long time. But yeah, Costa Rica was funny. We went down there, and Kevin was fantastic. He booked the whole trip. He had us into a really beautiful bed and breakfast thing on this hillside overlooking this break, and he brought me down like a mid-length. I just said, Kevin, I don't even have a board. He goes, I'll bring you a board. He just did everything, made it so easy for me. And we get out there, and the way it is for me at this point, it's pretty strange because I only surf a few times a year. So every time I go in, I don't really quite know how far I've dipped down, right. So it was like first takeoff, I stand up a beat too early and the wave passes me by, that kind of fucking just beginner stuff. And then the next one, I catch the wave, but both feet are on the wrong side of the stringer and off I go. And then, then the third wave I get and I get my feet in the right place and the wave kind of mushes and then it sort of sets up down the point. And I'm just going full fucking Devin Howard down there, just like up and down and up and down. I look up on the beach and I can see Kevin pointing at me. I'm just going, look at this, man. I was just in a groove. And then I go back to the falling off, like that I'd fall off 2 more waves and I get a good one again. So,
well, everybody says as you get older, it's getting to your feet, basically.
Totally.
That's the hardest part.
Totally.
Once you're up and riding, it's all good.
Yep.
It's like being on a bike.
Yep.
Interestingly, people wanted me to ask you about Fiji because last time we spoke,
Right.
You're like, I'm like, are you going to try to paddle out at Cloudbreak? And you're like, man, I'm just lucky if I get up and make it down the line.
Right. So the day we get there was the biggest day. And I told you I went with Mark Theodore, my lifelong surf pal. And again, I'm borrowing his board. And we get there. Have you been to Fiji before?
No.
I'm not sure if it's always true this way, but you get there around midday. So it's a long trip and you're exhausted, but we pulled into Motu and you could see Cloudbreak on the way, and it was big. And they drop us off. They have a little orientation thing or whatever, and then who wants to go where? And Mark just gets right on the boat to go to Cloudbreak, and I get on the other boat to go to swimming pools, which is kind of what my plan was anyway. Swimming pools is right off of, and swimming pools was a little bit overhead. It was a little bit onshore, just like an incredibly fun day at Uppers or something, and. That was amazing because I paddled out and didn't even stop from the boat into the lineup. And before I could even sit, a wave came and I just rode it back. And again, didn't kill it, but I went, wow, I went fast. And I just go, that's fantastic. I can still do it. So I rode a few more waves, came back in, put my stuff away. Mark comes in around dusk from Cloudbreak and he's fucking, bleeding from wrist to elbow, back, knee, ankle. Mark's such a good surfer, he's ridden 3 waves, huge waves, and on the third one, and he been talking about what's that
shish kebab.
She's talking about the shish kebabs, right? I go, I'm not fucking riding a place with a section called shish kebabs. He goes, you want to hit it? Don't worry, you can get out. It's not you avoid it. You can do it. He was trying to get me to go out there, and he just got rolled. And there's a picture of him that someone took from the boat, and Mark's standing there like in calf deep water on the reef at Shish Kebabs with about a 4-foot whitewater coming at him where there was nothing for him to do except just fall into the whitewater, and he just got rolled. And so, the first night he's there, the Motu doctors over there like putting on the, tapping him up and taping him up, and he was able to surf, but I just thought, I'm not going out there, and I didn't.
Yeah. So did you were playing it super conservatively when we spoke. Did you push the limits at all on that trip?
No, I didn't push limits at all. I don't think there's a limit. I don't think I have a limit to push anymore.
Yeah, no, I know you were saying that in advance. I was wondering if you might get baited into it.
I don't think so. Yeah, no, I don't think I was going to take the bait anymore. I took the bait, but I was first to take the bait for so long. I would always take the bait, but not now.
I asked Lauren to take a photo of us just so we can get the whole setup.
Get the drink out front.
Don't mind me.
Yeah. So how did it feel seeing your childhood in moving pictures in Alan Sarlo's time capsule?
Alan Sarlo time capsule. So that was amazing for me, and I'm feeling at this point, as much as I spent all of my days paging through old magazines, looking through old movies, just dwelling sort of in the past, because this was all stuff from literally the spot that I grew up, Venice and Santa Monica and Malibu. None of which Malibu accepted get any attention. They don't deserve any attention, It was, for me, it was the most sort of captivating half hour of watching I'd done, because it was like looking through somebody's scrapbook from when I was a kid. And my thing with Alan is really interesting, because we were on the Zephyr team for a little while together. Alan was maybe 3 years older than I am. And this memory is so, I don't know how this would have started, because I don't remember meeting him, but I just remember in 1970, he was keeping his board in my basement, because my family's house was right on the beach. We were actually 2 houses off the beach, and Alan lived up with his family maybe a mile and a half up Venice Boulevard. So he would ride his bike and get his board out of my basement. He had a pink Weber Performer, a really beautiful brand new board. He always had great boards. If I was 10, Alan would have been 13 or 14. I mean, you know, it's funny, the older I get, the less I trust anybody's take on their memories from that far back. But, you know, I could swear that he already had a mustache. He was huge. He was a huge 13-year-old, 14-year-old kid, already a really good surfer, fantastic surfer. And, you know, he would come in, get his board. It wasn't much, you know, it wasn't any, he wasn't like coming in, taking a shower. He just had a place to stash his board so he didn't have to ride it. And we lived right in front of Venice Jetty. So I got to watch, you know, Alan from super close range from that age. And, you know, I don't remember ever seeing him when he was even intermediate. He was always good. And so the first summer I surfed was at Santa Monica Pier, north side, which is just literally almost unsurfable. The surf it's so small, and there's a breakwater out there, and you're just riding the world's smallest waves to try to learn how to come in. And that was where Jay Adams' mom used to take Jay and I, drop us off in the morning, come pick us up. We'd go back to Venice. So that was maybe 2 miles from our house to Santa Monica Pier, which is where we spent our first summer. And the second summer, I think that was when Jay and I started going up to Malibu. And, you know, Alan was always a few steps ahead of us. So Jay and I start way on the inside at Malibu First Point, slowly work our way up the point, and, you know, all the way up. This is back in 1970 or 71 when there were 3 pretty distinct points at Malibu. And you're always looking up the point to see what's coming, you know, and what I was surfing mostly was the scrappiest little smallest scraps of the scraps, like as far in as you could get, and then you're sort of working your way up the point. But you can see all the levels where you want to get as you become a better surfer. It's all like literally stacked up for you. You want to get to the top of first point, then you want to go to second point, then go on to third point. And, you know, from that first summer, you'd look up, and it seemed like every few minutes you'd see Alan doing these big turns at third point. And even as a kid surfing, you know, he was way up in the pecking order, even at 13 or 14 or something. So we were kind of friends with him. This is way before the Zephyr thing started. But so when I was in 7th grade, when I was probably 12 or something, I was surfing Venice Breakwater, which is just north of Venice Jetty. I had a 5'4" Russell twin fin. It was my first new surfboard, and it was a beautiful little stick, as we used to call it. And this was the first time I'd ever paddled out on a really big day. And it was a big winter swell. It was, I don't know, you know, 6 or 8 feet, and it was breaking left off that weird jetty into the sort of bay, sort of breaking left towards POP Pier. And I got out there pretty freaked out because I hadn't been on any surf that big. And it wasn't too crowded. There was maybe 10 people, but it was the day of the year without question. And it's somehow, you know, a really clean, I'm going to say 6-foot wave came to me, and I took off on my little twin fin, and I just rode this wave, I don't know, you know, 50 or 75 yards down, which in Venice and Santa Monica terms is ridiculous. I just felt like, you know, like Jeff Hackman at that point. I got out of the water, paddled back out, feeling like, wow, big wave surfing. This is easy. And then I got caught inside by a really big set, huge, big set, bailed out, but I came up, I got really tumbled. I was so tiny in 7th grade. I grew a foot in high school, so I was I was probably 4'6" or something. I was a really tiny little kid. Tumble, came up, hyperventilating. Underneath another wave came up, and it was just basically panicked. And next thing I hear is Alan saying, hey, Matt, you're okay. And Alan comes over, and either his board's gone in or his board's hanging by the leash. And he saw that I was freaked out. And he came over, and there's another set coming. And he grabbed my little teeny tiny waist, and he said, take a breath. And he was holding me so I could look at him in the eyes. Take a breath. And he just pulled me down. And it was like being attached to a piling or something. You know, he just, we're down under the water, and I had these giant hands around my tiny waist, and we could feel the wave go above. He came up, there was no waves left, and he goes, okay, just swim in, you're good. So he, you know, I say he saved my life. I probably would have maybe been okay, but I was scared out of my mind, and he was so calm. He didn't just say, he actually looked at me and talked me down before he did this. So, and then, you know, eventually he and I were on the Zephyr team at the same time too, and that was fun.
I wonder if he remembers that story.
He does. I've told. He and I have talked. I've reminded him a few times.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Alan Sarlo time capsule that I referenced is the title of a film. And Alan was cleaning out a room or a garage or something and found all these old 16 millimeter, or maybe it was Super 8, I don't even know, but old film reels from his childhood where he documented all of that stuff. His youth in Southern California, but then he was traveling the world at a relatively young age. So it's like early footage of J-Bay, early footage of, I forget where, but all around the world, Hawaii for sure. And the way that they stitched the film together, there's no interviews with anybody. There's no modern footage. It's all the found footage. And then Alan just narrating it in a very casual way. Feels like it's just one take off the cuff. It's not scripted in any way. But it was all unbefore seen footage, never before seen footage, which is really cool. And that's why I thought of you, because obviously you appear in some of the footage, and I'm like, wow, this has got to be like an incredible gift to have of your youth that you've never seen before, basically.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. I always want to see more of the people and the boards and less of the surfing. So when we were taking those movies, I wasn't taking those movies with Alan, but anytime someone had a camera, it was we thought it was kind of a waste to just go over to here to get so-and-so in their towel or to show the car or to, you know, like that kind of stuff. We wanted to see how we surfed. It's expensive, first of all. Right.
So yeah, it's a waste of film.
And now if you look at all that stuff, to me, like the stuff that catches my eye, there was the one shot of Alan and myself and John Baum and Nathan Pratt. We were holding had a contest, we were holding our trophies. And you just see these four long-haired, scraggly kids in 1974 laughing and holding up their trophies. And I was just looking at the clothes I wear, and then I was telling Jody, I go, I don't have any recollection of who I was like, or, you know, so it's weird to see myself and not have any recollection. All I remember when I look at that is of the other guys who I remember I liked and didn't like, you know, and John Baum, the guy on the far right of that, who looked just like me with the long blonde hair, sweetheart, such a nice guy. I really loved him. I'm still in touch with him on Facebook. Nathan Pratt didn't like kids, and I was just underfoot, it felt like, for him. And then Alan also, I was kind of invisible to Alan, except I was a Zephyr team kid. So,
what were I've never asked you what your parents were doing, or how did they land on that?
I got to send you this article, because the LA Times magazine, which I think was called Westways in 1967 or 8, did an article on Venice, and the intro for the article was talking about this unusual family that had moved from the valley, San Fernando Valley, to beachfront on Venice to try something new. And that was my family. It was my mom and dad. My dad worked at Rand Corporation. He was a physicist, and my mom was a teacher. She taught at Pier Avenue Junior High School. And they were both hip, you know, very sort of, they came from sort of super culturally engaged families, politically and arts, and everybody grew up. You know, I'm from a LA family, like many generations in LA, and they were just felt like some people did, I suppose, in '67 or '68, that they were kind of wasting away in the valley, in the suburbs. So let's pack up and move the kids to Venice. And it's funny, we moved in '66. I was 6, my brother was 4, I think. And we have slightly different takes on this, my brother and I, because we moved into a pretty sketchy neighborhood, you know, and we were like the rich kids we weren't that rich, but we had more money we had friends, you know, Jay Adams was a welfare kid, and Danny Blade, our other good friend, was a welfare kid, and Scott Parker, my friend, was living with his mom, who was she did a postal route and was raising 3 kids on her own just from, walking a postal. So it was all poor kids, And we were there from kindergarten, and I left just after 7th grade. But it was a radical place to grow up, and I cherish it. I love it. Parents were not part of our scene almost at all. My mom had this huge antique brass horn thing that at 6 o'clock she would blow on it like this, and wherever we were, we could hear it anywhere in the neighborhood. We had to come home for dinner, and we had to keep our grades up. My parents were strict in their own way, but they were also super lib, and my parents had these huge Venice parties, and everyone was high, and it was a wild environment to grow up in. I wouldn't change a day of it, but I'm really glad that we left. My parents split up, and my brother was going into 6th grade, and I was going into 7th. So my mom took my brother to Manhattan Beach, which is close to Venice, but a world away in terms of sort of the culture. Like Manhattan Beach was just sort of Squaresville, and much nicer. And I went with my dad, so it was pretty weird. My brother and I split up, and then I got into a big hassle with my dad in 8th grade and came and lived in Manhattan Beach. So I've always been pretty malleable about saying where I'm from, because sometimes I'm from the Valley. I was born in the Valley. I guess we'll say I'm from Venice, because that's kind of cool and core. But I'm also will gladly say I'm from South Bay, which is Manhattan Beach. I got there when I was in 9th grade.
How did they feel about you embracing surf and skate life?
My parents, I think, were, if you keep a B average, which was not difficult, we're good. They didn't push anything on us. I remember, so getting back to Alan for a second, I got on the Zephyr team, and we were supposed to go to all these WSA contests, and Alan, it must have been, so when I got into 7th grade, so I was at a place called Mark Twain Junior High School in Venice, and Alan was at Venice High, and they were right across the street from each other. So I come in as a 7th grader, and I remember Alan pulling up, so he must have been a freshman. Back then it was, middle school for me was 7th, 8th, 9th. So he's a 10th grader at Venice High. I think he was on the football team. He was huge. And also a surfer. But I remember him just pulling up to Mark Twain in that van, and he had that surfer van. And I think he was from a pretty wealthy family. So for sure, when Alan was in 10th grade, he was driving a bitchin' van with probably like airbrush scene on each side, and definitely like a portal window on the back end.
They usually had a name on the back of the van too.
I don't know if it had a name, but it probably had a little airbrush scene.
Yeah.
Definitely had the surfer, the little portal you'd look out, and it was just this brand new bitchin' surfer van. And he was for sure mustachioed there. So he's 16, just, again, bigger than any two adults that you would see. And, he was cool. He had the van, he was really good. And what I was going to say is, in the next year when I was living with my mom in Manhattan, Alan still had that van, and we all had to go to Santa Cruz for the Santa Cruz 3A Open, which is one of the big contests of the year. So it's going to be, the Zephyr team going up to represent. And Alan had the car to take us. So to his credit, he goes from Venice, drives all the way to Manhattan Beach to pick me up. Then we go pick up John Baum and somebody else, and we all go up to Santa Cruz. And I don't even, we probably slept in the van or something. And I was gone 3 days, and I was like 14. And my mom's just going, "Oh, you going with Alan? Okay, yeah. So, here's $10 for food or something." So they seemed to either trust me, or they trusted the people that I knew, or we just got really, really lucky. And I know that when I left Venice just before going into 8th grade, I think was a good time, because I had a lot of friends who stayed, and it just got a lot harder for them, because up into 7th grade, like I was already sort of just beginning to do drugs, like just smoke, but it wasn't yet too much pressure on, and that kind of changed when you got into high school. So high school got a lot harder for everybody, drug-wise and stuff. And so I got out, and Manhattan Beach was a lot less pressure for all that stuff, and so it was a good time to move neighborhoods.
Even with you telling that story of paddling out on the biggest day of the year, and Alan's saving you. You said you were 12, and I'm like, can you imagine letting your 12-year-old kid paddle out without being there to protect him or save him? Or
So you know what was gnarlier when I was watching that Alan Sarlo, when I was watching the time capsule, was I had forgotten how terrifying the Venice Jetty was. So did you see some of those waves where Alan's pulling into those tubes that are just like sucking and right in front of those rocks?
He even says, if this was prep for Hawaii, we all wanted to go to Hawaii.
Right.
If you could figure this wave out, you knew you were maybe ready.
That wave was horrifying, I've thought about that. I've dreamed about that wave so often because that was right in front of my house, and I went out there so many days where I didn't want to because I was so scared of it, and I had to. It was there. I had to go out and figure that wave out, and I never rode those waves like Alan was out there. But I learned to get close enough to the rocks so I could pick waves up, and it wasn't just that it was just sucking and glurging off that sandbar right in front of the rocks. It was that there was a couple rocks that were sort of away from the main jetty that you had to look out for, and there was always a lot of warble and stuff because you're getting all the, and it was just a. And then the funny thing is, like, and you can see it in the you can see it in the video. And this is true for all the breaks, like same with POP Pier, like all these spots that are like quote unquote legendary for that area. Fucking Stesic and Stacy and those guys, they've done such a good job at making that place seem legendary. And it was just, it was such a shitty, wave-wise, it was such a joke. Venice Jetty was this sucking takeoff, like a slab almost, that you could ride and then it would just turn into a closeout. And POP Pier, the Cove thing, same thing. It was just it was a bigger wave, and on the really good days, you could get a couple turns in before it goes into the closeout. So none of those waves were especially good. It wasn't like we were, and that's why everybody wanted to go surf Malibu, because it was just a real wave. So we made, especially the Cove, and then the Cove is a legendary surf spot because of the pier. The pier made it the most photogenic wave. One of them. There was one clip of Alan shot on the other side of the pier. I think he called it cages or something. He called it. What did he call it? There was a left that kind of came off POP Pier, but it didn't really. It was actually down 50 yards or something. But there was Alan riding a left, and you can see the pier behind him, but it's just jutting up pilings, and the paper mache mountain at the end had been all burned down. And when Alan said that the pier had just burned down, he's not lying exactly, but that pier would burn every 6 months. So the pier burned, and then and it would burn again a few months later. There must have been just some pyro out there, or it just became a thing to do. Probably if you were in high school, just go burn the pier down. And it just and like the city just never cleaned it up for years. That thing just was there, getting rottener and gnarlier and weirder. So when I was in 7th grade at Mark Twain Junior High School, what we would do, speaking about parents not giving a shit where you are, you get out of school, ride the bus to I forget the bottom. I think it was. I don't know if it was Rose Street or something. Anyway, we'd all clamber down to POP Pier, which, do you know what POP used to be? Like a Disneyland by the beach. Like it was all these rides and stuff. I actually had my 6th or 7th birthday there. It was awesome. Really fun, funky, like kind of like, it wasn't like Disneyland. It was more like Long Beach Pike. It was kind of funky, but really fun. And they closed it down, I think, in 67 or 68. So when I was going down there after 7th grade, we just knew how to climb on the pier. And so we would climb up on the pier, 6 of us or something, or 10 of us, and you could just, and it was 3 years in decay, but it was still solid enough you could walk through, and you could walk through literally into the fucking House of Mirrors. So you're just in a House of Mirrors, and if you wanted to throw something through one of the mirrors, go for it. And if you see those pictures of POP, what it looked like originally, there was this huge, they made this huge mountain at the end of it. It was supposed to be kind of like the Matterhorn at Disneyland, but it was just the big POP mountain. And a roller coaster went through it. So we would just get on the roller coaster tracks and walk up into the mountain and walk along the tracks. And it was insane that nobody died or was or was at least injured. We were playing in this kind of fucked up, kind of like arcade hellscape. You know, it was all, and then as it burned down, you could only go so, like there'd be a big burn part, and then you could only go so far out there, and it was just a messed up place. And I'm fascinated by looking at, you know, if you really know the period, you can look at the surf pictures and tell what year it is by how far gone the pier is as it deteriorates. You know?
And all of that debris presumably ended up in the surf, right, in the lineup, so it made it dangerous?
It was pretty dangerous even without the debris, because the pier itself didn't go straight out like parallel lines like Huntington say. The pier had all these little nooks, and like the pier was much, much wider at the base, and then it would kind of go in almost like wingers on a surfboard or something. So you were riding, you were going right, and you almost like it would kind of, you had to clear the pier like 2 or 3 different times. And there was this one corner that had a pier, a piling that went off at an angle.
Right.
And the cool guys, I never did this, would shoot that thing. And if you were up high enough, you were up at the acute angle of the thing, right? And so my friend John Baum, who's in that picture of the 4 guys of us getting the trophies, he's the other guy with the long blonde hair. John was a great surfer. He was a year older than me. And I'm out there surfing with him, and I was always kind of on the inside of John. And I watched John try to go through, I think they called it peg leg. And he tries to clear peg leg, and he was too high up, and he fell forward, and he broke his collarbone. And, you know, and I've never broken a collarbone, but I've heard it's one of the most painful things. And John, who was a year older and seemed a lot older and was so cool and just such a calm, nice guy, was in so much pain. And I had to walk him home, you know, walk up the thing to where his mom was, and his mom just rushed him off to the hospital. I was just there, you know, 7th or 8th grader sitting there waiting for my mom to come pick me up. And poor John was out of action for weeks. So, you know, I was terrified of Venice Jetty. I was really shit scared of the Cove, you know. But surfing with John, surfing with Alan, surfing with Adrian Reef and Ronnie J and all those guys, surfing with Jeff Sibley at Venice Jetty. Like we were saying earlier, I did want to try to see how far. I always wanted to see if I could go further. And because I had all these great surfers who were a lot braver than I was and were a lot better than I was, it pulled me along way further than I would have gone if it would have just been me and Jay. Although Jay would have pulled me along too. So,
well, let's talk about Jay. I'm curious. I'm always curious, not just with you, but like how much that upbringing of your parents translates to the talent of the athlete. Because an argument could be made for Jay, like his explosiveness in surfing, you know, there's childhood trauma and you're kind of, it's an acting out or something, or just a lack of conservativeness could be related to the way that you were brought up. Or I've also heard people talk about Jay as just being an unbridled natural talent. Like it was just born in him.
Yeah. So
do you have thoughts on it?
Yeah, totally. No. So I met Jay, really early on, like before we surfed. I knew him for maybe 3 or 4 years before we even started surfing, 2 or 3 years. I got to Venice just before kindergarten, and I think Jay was probably already there. And again, we lived right on the Strand at first, we called it the boardwalk. And Jay lived up next to a vacant lot in a tiny little place. He and his mom, Fellaine, and his stepdad, Kent, lived in a place that was smaller than this kitchen, this room, and your living room here. Like, that's it. And the front half of it was a factory, because Kent used to work with Dale Velzy, and I think later on with Dave Sweet. So Kent was really good with plastics and foam and surfboards and everything. And Kent was amazing with his hands, and he could do anything with resins and fiberglass. So Kent, I'm not sure what he was doing. It couldn't have been much, because they were very much on, you know, I think a welfare family. But Kent surfed. Kent used to be was a Howley Beach boy. And Jay ran pretty wild. Fellaine, she wasn't anything like she was in the Lords of Dogtown movie. She was big, and she always wore like these sort of loose sort of dresses. And she was like a middle-aged sort of hippie. I mean, middle-aged, I don't know how old she really was. And she didn't say much, and she had a really cutting sense of humor. And I remember my mom telling me years later that Flane was an interesting person, and she said, the thing about Flane that always blew our mind was that she was a Scrabble savant. She could beat anybody in Scrabble. My mom was a killer Scrabble player. So Jay was the poorest person I knew growing up, but we were so jealous of him because Kent started making him skateboards. Kent was the one who got him surf. That's what Kent used. Kent used to run even though he was doing all this stuff with plastics and foam and everything, there wasn't a market for it at that point. So Kent, underneath POP Pier on the north side, Kent had the surf mat concession. So Jay would say, hey, come, you guys can go get free mats from us. And we would go, my friends and I would get remember those, this is way before your time, the blue and yellow surf mats. You could just get them and go out. And that's sort of how I learned how to ride waves was. And every now and then, if we went down there early enough and Jay would go down with his dad to open up the surf mat place, we would see him taking out this board that Ken had made him. This would have been 67 probably. And Ken had made him this little tiny, it was still like a longboard shape. It's like a psychedelic color swirl board that Jay was just learning how to go out and surf on. And so I was at that point 7 or 8, and we would just go, oh my God, Jay's already surfing. He's surfing already. And then the next year when I was going into 4th grade and Jay was going into 3rd grade, his mom said, this summer I'm going to take you and Jay to Santa Monica Pier, and you guys can surf, watch out for each other and learn how to surf. So that's how I started surfing, was that Jay's mom took us to the beach every morning and picked us up. We'd pack a bag and we'd go down to Santa Monica Pier with a towel in our bag and ride the worst surf imaginable. We didn't care. We're learning how to surf. We were just going straight, I had a red 7.4 cut down that my uncle gave me, and Jay had that same board I was just telling you about. And they used to blackball the other side of the pier, Bay Street, where the surf wasn't any better. It was just a little bit bigger. And then the bigger kids, when they would blackball, would come to our side because you were allowed to surf on the north side of the pier. And a few things I remember was right away. For our first summer, we were picked up on as like the Groms for older kids. And Jay was really good. I told you before, I was always in his shadow because you could not take your eyes off him. Even at 8, he was super captivating, super energetic, and crazy. But you can't be, when you're 8, it's not threatening crazy like it was later on. He was just fun. He was just this funny little kid that would do anything. And one of the things that Jay taught me to do, or I don't know if he taught me, but we would eat our whatever lunch we brought. We would be done by 10 in the morning, and we could climb like little little monkeys up the side of Santa Monica Pier, which is the big tourist pier where all the rides and the arcades are. And in 20 minutes, we could panhandle like a buck or two each. Hey, mister, can I have a dime to call my mom? And 9 out of 10 will say, hit the road, and one of them is going to give you a dime and someone else is going to give you a quarter. And then we'd have enough to go get French fries and go play the arcade games, and then come down and surf again, and then maybe do it again, come back down, and then we'd go home. So we were hustling money, literally nickels, dimes, quarters, playing games, and coming down and being the little pets to the older kids that were hanging out on that side of the pier. And then the next year, we did it. Then the next year we went over to Bay Street and did it there, which is a few blocks south. And then, of course, went up to Malibu, and we got in. We were just the little grommets up with the Malibu guy. And, you're just leveling up. That's what I was saying to you earlier about like what I loved about surfing and why I think I finally stopped. You start doing it, and it's just all it is really is a matter of leveling up on different ways. You're becoming a better surfer. You're learning how to get more waves. You start competing like I did. You start riding bigger waves. You start traveling. Level up, do. And so it felt like it took me 45 years to get to where I didn't see any more places where it was much place to go. But all of that whole thing with going from north side of Santa Monica Pier to Bay Street to inside First Point Malibu, that's the first few level up. And, that all started off with Jay. I had 3 years with Jay where he was an unbelievable person to run with. so a year after we started surfing, we started skateboarding. My dad was able to get a copy of this movie called Skater Dater. Have you ever seen that movie?
No.
Fuck. It's on my site. You got to look at it.
Okay.
And Skater Dater blew our minds, and we decided we were going to start skateboarding. And in 1970, man, nobody was skateboarding. And you could go into the Hobie shop in Santa Monica and get a clay, the wheels hadn't gone urethane yet. You could get a Hobie super surfer with clay wheels for probably $4 or something. And we got skateboards, and we were the only kids skating. It was a dead art at that point.
Yeah.
And we had a ball doing that. We would, at that age, every block it all just feels like another region to sort of explore. And we would find out that 4 blocks over there was a driveway that was this, or they would show a surf movie at the Civic, and Jay and I would show up with our boards, and it was like we would skateboard through the crowd, and just there were these moments of showing off, and again, me always behind Jay, but it was fun because we were kind of a little team, and we were the two little radical kids. And then there was one year at the Santa Monica at the local surf contest at Bay Street, or at Pico next door, one street over, and they had this annual contest for residents. And the first year, Jay and I think, made the finals of the boys, and the next year we were still in boys division, but we also entered juniors just for fun. And so they ran out the boys preliminaries, and we won. And then they sent out the juniors preliminaries, and Jay and I were in the first and second heat, and we won the juniors heats as well. And the juniors went over to the people and said, "You can't have these guys in the juniors. They're too young. They're in the boys division," and they kicked us out of the juniors division to be in the boys. So it was all so much fun. And Jay and I don't think I brought anything to Jay. He would have done whatever he was going to do. He needed me, I think, just because I was another person to do it with. He had someone, and maybe he had someone watching him all the time, which he loved. But I don't think I brought anything to him, but he brought a lot to me because I was so timid. I was so kind of holding back by nature. And so, anything that I have, any kind of little tiny edge that I have, or any kind of, anytime I do something that's a little bit out of my comfort zone, straight back to hanging out for 3 years with Jay, because it developed because I was hanging out with him. But we couldn't have been any more unalike. He was a nutcase. He was ADHD. Oh, you were asking about, his home life was fine. Like, he was poor, but his mom loved him. His dad was super cool. There was nothing weird going on there. It was just a really tight little 3-unit. They didn't have any money, but they were a really happy, more so than all the people that I knew in Venice that had money. So that part was fine. Jay would have just come right out of the womb the way he was. He was hyper. He had ADHD or something, and he could not sit still, and he could not. And if he was going to be moving, he was going to be wanting to do something that was going to provoke something. So we'd just be sitting there on the beach after doing some mat surfing when he was, I was 8 and he was 7, and we're just going through pulling sand up to our chest, getting warm. Everyone's eating lunch, and then like Jay's eating a peach, and he would just stand up. And there used to be these things called trams that would go by on these trams that were just like this beachfront free thing that would take you from this pier, and all these old people would get in the tram and they just ride for free to the next pier over. And and they retired these a while back, but they were electric, and they would just go back and forth. And Jay just stands up with this half of a peach and just wings it at the tram, and it just hits the upper thing, and just, it's like it just explodes. Splatter. Like ordnance all over it. And the tram stops, and everyone's looking and pointing, and next thing I know, Jay's already halfway to the ocean, because he knows what he's done. He's going to get in trouble. And we're just going, fuck, and we go, Jay, and we're all following him. We all run into the beach because there was 100 people in the water, and we could just blend into the. He would do that shit, and he wouldn't even give you any warning. It would just come out of nowhere, and it was half funny and half like, what are you doing? And anyway.
So where did your paths diverge?
Our paths diverged because I think just before he went into 7th grade, or maybe 6th, he and his mom moved from Venice to Santa Monica. This is still before Zephyr. And so we were still pretty close. We're still just one city apart. We still hung out quite a bit. And then after 7th grade, my parents split up. They were split up, and I moved to Beverly Glen, which was a big weird one-year detour where I was living, in West LA. I was still surfing, but not as much. I was kind of stuck out there. And I would still see Jay a little bit then, but that was right about, so 8th grade or 9th grade was when the Zephyr thing started. And the Zephyr surf team wasn't much, in history would just look at it as the thing that started the Zephyr skate team. And I was an okay skater, but Jay was an exceptionally good skater. And so then by 9th grade, he was still surfing, but I think the skating was kind of becoming more of a thing for him and not so much for me. And so that we just, at that point, I have no idea where he went to high school, what he did. It got weird for him, and I remember there was a trade show at some point in the 80s where I kept hearing rumors about him, and I stood in line at a trade show, I'm going to say 85 or 6, and he was so fucked up when I got to the front of the line, and I wanted to surprise him and say, "Hey Jay, here I am, will you sign my sticker or something, whatever," and I kind of did whatever my line was, and he didn't recognize me. Yeah.
Brutal. So were you able to reconnect later?
Right before he died. Yeah, he got.
So it went that long without a reconnection.
Yeah.
From early.
He was pretty gone. I think he was in jail for a while, and he went through all kinds of horrible, bad stuff.
Yeah, but I feel like for the last decade or so of his life, he turned a new leaf. Maybe it wasn't a full decade.
Mm-hmm. It might not have been a full decade. It might have been 5 or 6 years though. But I also. At that point, it was like I was so grateful for all the stuff I've just said to you, to have been able to sort of draw from that energy, and it shaped me, and I think it shaped him a little bit, and it was a great odd couple pairing that I think was beneficial to both of us. Until it wasn't, because by the time I got to 8th or 9th grade, I had a whole different crew to surf with. And in the early years, the reason Jay and I connected, because nobody wanted to surf as much as Jay except me, and nobody wanted to surf as much as me except Jay. So we were perfect, because I wasn't hyper like he was, but I was super singular focused, and we would go out, and he would stay out in the water as long as I would stay out, and I would skate for as long as we would do that as long as, and everybody else was off doing other stuff. So we were great for each other for that reason. But yeah, then he went into this whole other dark, strange thing, and I stayed. I went to college for a while, and it just went radically different. And I don't know. I have sort of mixed feelings about how much do you stay in touch, because now we can stay in touch with everybody, right? I mean, everybody's on Facebook pretty much, and I had no intention of he reached out to me on Facebook and said, "Hey, it's Jay, how you been?" And actually, he sent me a friend request, and I didn't know if I wanted to. He got super religious, right. And but I thought, I'm not gonna. I didn't have any premonition or anything, but I said, "Yeah, friends," and we had some messages went back and forth, and then at some point, I thought, "Gosh, this sounds pretty. I don't know." I was grasping or something about, I should do an article about the two of us growing up, because I should check in with him. I just turned 50, I think, and I guess I was curious as to sort of how how it was and what it would be like to see him again. So we arranged. I flew down from Seattle, and we ended up having lunch at a building. I don't know what it's called now. It used to be called the Del Mar Club, and then it was Synanon. And if anyone here is listening from that period, there's this huge brick building right at Bay Street, beachfront, and it used to be a really fancy beach club called the Del Mar Club, and then it became Synanon, which was kind of a cultish, weird thing. And now it's just a sort of a place where stars will have. And we met there for lunch, and it was funny because Jay comes in. I'm just looking the way I always do, just dad pants and t-shirt or something, and here comes Jay with his his amazing looking wife. And he is this short, stocky guy with just face tats, and he's just as manic as he ever was. and I'm kind of going, oh my God, are we going to get in here? Or what's going to, because it's Venice, because it's Santa Monica, I'm convinced now, because they just showed us right into a fancy table. I thought they must have thought he was a star. He acts like a star, So we sat down and we kind of did what you and I are doing right now, and we were on perfectly safe ground. I was talking to him about our early days surfing, and we were sitting at a table where we could see Santa Monica Pier, right where we started, and then we could look over this way and see where POP used to be. So we were doing that, and it was fine. And at some point, he asked about a mutual friend of ours who had transitioned. This is 15 years ago, before anyone was sort of thinking about it. But this friend, Johanna, had fully transitioned. I said, oh yeah, it's I forgot what Joe's changed her name to. And it changed everything, because all of a sudden I could see Jay went into this thing where that's not right. So I kind of shut it down, and I went back to talking about the old days. But he was just in a really different place. But he was drug free, and he was clean, and he was surfing well again. And
I'd see him surfing in Huntington all the time for those last few years, and he was surfing great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And didn't he die in Alan's arms or something? Like, he went down to Mexico, and I think he had a heart attack at night after a great day of surfing at Puerto Escondido, and I think Alan went into his room, and I think Jay died right, with Alan. And Alan and Jay were pretty good friends.
Yeah, so Sarlo was friends with him when they were young, but definitely kind of got disconnected, I guess, during a certain number of years. But I don't think that Alan would mind me sharing this, and I'll have him on the podcast, and I think he's comfortable telling this story. But that trip to Puerto Escondido, Alan became a follower of Christ.
Oh,
so yeah. Alan had been on his own path that was probably not the best path, and Jay had gotten clean, and Jay was like, "Hey, man," and when I say Alan's path, not the best path, I'm not saying drugs. I'm not even sure what any of it was, but this is what Alan told me. And so Jay was like, "Hey, man, I want you to come down to Puerto." And I think Alan already had a different trip booked with his kid, but he felt like Jay was being kind of serious, or he had some sort of a premonition that he should take Jay up on the offer. So he rebooked his flight and went to Puerto Escondido instead. And Jay was really giving his testimony, essentially. And Alan felt convicted by it. And Jay did end up dying on that trip. Alan was there. I didn't know that it was in his arms. I don't know if that's true or not.
That could be something that got to me with.
But he was like, Alan said that it was definitely a cosmic or something else going on. He would never normally rebook his trip. He would normally just be like, "Oh, I'll see you after my trip," or something like that. But there was something else that encouraged him to go down and spend that time with Jay. And
was it just the two of them, or is anybody else there?
I think there was another person or two. Wasn't just them. Those
kind of waves, that kind of Puerto thing, just fast, hollow. Jay was really good in that kind of surf. He was a fun surfer to watch. He got better and better. Like he was good when we were kids, but when he moved to Hawaii, he was low center of gravity, and he kind of had this little like a Tom Carroll sort of stance, down tight, and he had big legs, and he was just good at backdoor taking off, pumping, and he could fit in tubes and stuff, and that he would have probably had a great last day out of Puerto.
I mean, I know we have the Dogtown films. There should be a documentary on Jay Adams.
I don't know. I think about that. I think about Jay all the time because of how famous he was, and I think about what makes not just Jay, but Bunker Spreckles, Peter Druin, all these people that we just can't keep our eyes off of. And first of all, it's like you have to be good looking. It's like there's a weird set of circumstances that make it happen. You have to be good looking. You have to have something really, really deep, flawed wrong with you, or something weird, or something like, I guess I go, why is it, Jay, whatever Jay was going to say, as much as it was sort of really interesting, and it wasn't really about his talent, because Tony Alva was a better skater. There were a lot of other better skaters than Jay. But what did Jay have? It was those pictures that you see of him when he's in 8th grade with his hair and his Pendleton, and he's down low and he's doing a turn. It was the picture. It was the facial expression. It was the way he would mug. It was 100% attitude, or not 100%, 80% attitude, 20% what he could actually do. So there's just these people that we're just attracted to, and I really question like why we spend so much time on people who are essentially, the doomed, beautiful doomed people.
Well, it's an interesting story arc. I mean, it's.
Well, go look at this. You go look at the story arc of Jay Adams from after he's in like 10th or 11th grade. Have you looked into it?
I know it. Yeah.
It's
it's sad.
He killed somebody.
Well,
I know. He manslaughtered somebody, right?
Yeah. But that's everybody who just heard that said now wants to know more. So that's right. My point is it's an interesting story arc. There's these extremes that we want to learn more about. That's why. Yeah,
I guess the reason why I think about it all the time is because why is it that like somebody then like Matt Kivlin, who was the surfer that Dora surfed himself like.
Okay.
So Matt Kivlin is the best surfer in California at about age early 20s or something. He quits, goes to college, becomes an architect, and makes a whole name for himself in LA architecture. Just lives a great life. No one's, in 10 years, 20 years from now, no one's going to know who he is because he didn't flame out.
Well, there's definitely not going to be a documentary made about him.
Right. So it's interesting to me. I guess you'd say, and then, and again, I don't know. Look, I'm being a hypocrite because I can't stop thinking about Jay, and I can't stop thinking about Druin even, so I'm kind of being a hypocrite, but I go, then I go, well, fuck, Bunker Spreckles. We remember Bunker Spreckles. Why? Well, two reasons. The main being that he was rich enough that he got to hire Art Brewer to come along and take all those photos. If we hadn't have been taking pictures of if Art hadn't have been taking pictures of Bunker, there's no movie to be made. There's no. What was the movie that Takuji made?
Bunker 77.
Right. I mean, that's all because somebody was there filming it. And you could kind of say the same a little bit about the whole Dogtown thing. There was other incredible skaters and skate scenes that were happening. And the Dogtown guys had Stesic, who was an amazing photographer and art director. And they had someone there. It was another photographer who was really good that was also taking the pictures. But they had people there to sort of do that. And I don't know, the whole thing about who gets to tell surf history and why it gets told the way it does as I get older, it keeps getting weirder and harder for me to sort of easier for me to be uncomfortable with. Like, one of the things I've learned is that a big part of what ends up being history is who lives the longest to be able to tell the story at the end.
It's true.
And I've got a great example of that is there was this group of surfers before Gidget that were surfing Malibu in the late 40s and the early 50s. The girls who had the girl boards were built for that Tommy Zahn and Kivlin and Joe Quigg made these lightweight boards that turned better that the boys then borrowed and kind of invented performance surfing. But those boards were all made for this group of high school girls, all these girls that went to Samo High. And there was, I think, like 6 of them. And the last living one is Vicki Flaxman, a.k.a. Vicki Williams. And she's Vicki Williams because she married Van Williams, who was the Green Hornet in the TV show. And Vicki and Van were married for like 50 years, a wonderful long marriage. And Vicki was the best surfer out of all of them. Or was she? Because she's the one that lived the longest, I think she was because Joe Quigg used to say she was the best surfer, but she's still alive and I'm in touch with her. And just because of the fact that she's living and now has this long, like 10,000 word interview on Encyclopedia of Surfing about, it's an amazing, really fun read. And if anybody wants to, after we're done here, go to EOS, look up the Vicki Williams interview. She's wonderful. And, she at 96, I think, or 95 is so sharp and so funny, has the best memories for all this, but she's also really catty about all the little things. Like there was no insult that she hasn't remembered from when she was 16. And she's laughing about it, but she's also, she was always a drunk. I paddled so much better. I didn't win that, and it's all super funny. And so if you're old and if you're personable and you can come across to the younger people, who's going to question you?
Right.
Or now,
I'm okay with that.
I don't know how to not be, because what am I supposed to do? Like, how am I supposed to go check to see how good of a surfer Robin Grigg was, or how good of a surfer was, Daryl and Zanuck, all the women who were dead that Vicki outlasted.
Okay, but I think you're taking it too seriously, because two people viewing the set of events on a given day are going to have two different perspectives on it anyways. So what is truth? What is actual history?
Here's where I think it gets weird. I think what you have to do is you take someone like Vicki and you don't care about who was surfing better. You just say, Vicki's going to give all of us a first-hand look at what this was like just being at Malibu in 1949. And that's great, So the only time it gets a little bit weird is when there's things being said that where you can sense that people are bending it a little bit, usually in their own favor, But I kind of agree with you. You go with the sources you have.
And we all just want entertainment, to
yes.
be honest. And so when I say like the documentary, I would love to see the documentary on Jay. It's not to say over a documentary on Kivlin.
Right.
I would like to see the Kivlin one too.
Right.
It's just if we are financing a film, we want sensational bits that are going to get the broad audience, and so you go with the sensational story. But of course, I would love to have a documentary on everybody.
Right.
But to your point, though, can you identify maybe, in addition to Vicki, other unsung heroes who would be deserving if the footage existed?
Absolutely. So Joey Hamasaki, who was denied being the best female surfer for 4 or 5 years because of Joyce Hoffman, who was a better overall surfer or a better competitor for sure, but Joyce Hoffman wins 2 world titles. But Joyce Hoffman was like a gymnast surfer. She was so athletic and so strong and was very competitive. And Joey Hamasaki was this tiny, quiet,
demure,
tomboyish, whispery, quiet, shy surfer who was amazing. Comes over from Honolulu, I want to say in 65, 66. And she was the David Nueva of longboard era women's surfers. Beautiful to watch. I mean, Joyce Hoffman, you were watching, someone do a tumbling pass. She was just strong and did all the moves and did them all like 1, 2, 3, 4, bang, 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 point, 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 point. Joey Hamasaki was just a stylist, and she was gorgeous and as stylish as anyone, male or female, either one. And never was loud, never said anything, always in the background. And you know what? She died a few years ago. I'll just say it. She was Asian. She was sort of chubby. She was, I think, closeted gay person. Just gone, man. And I was friends with her. I wasn't friends. We became phone pals after a while. I reached out to her, and I reached out to Joey in 2000 when we were doing the first edition of Encyclopedia. And she was so quiet. You could hardly hear her. I think she was living with her parents or something. So you would, hello. Oh, yeah, is Joey there? And yeah, hold on. And the phone would get put down, and it was like, being back in junior high school, you'd hear the feet would go off, and you'd hear something, hey, Joey! And then feet would come back. There was only one line in the house, apparently, somewhere up in the hills in Honolulu. Hello? And hey, Joey, hey, Joey, it's Matt, Warshaw, I'm doing this project. And it took, weeks or months before she was sort of relaxed enough to, but we stayed in touch over, so she has this little entry in the book version of Encyclopedia of Surfing. And there was something about the fact that she was living up in the hills behind Honolulu. I don't think she drove. She had really bad hips. She hadn't surfed in years, and just completely forgotten. A delightful woman who, at the 1968 World Titles, I think lost early. And they went into, what's the main town in Puerto Rico near where the contest would have been? What is the main? They went into somewhere where
I can't think.
They went into somewhere where there was some clubs or something, and Joey sat down at a drum set, and it turns out that she was just an amazing jazz drummer,
Wow.
doing her thing and stuff. And the friends she had adored her, but she didn't care about being famous. She didn't. And there's this whole life that she led. She loved surfing. I don't think she wanted much to do whatsoever with being part of the scene, And
Well, and I definitely understand people's personality. They shy away from the limelight. But once you were trying to pin the story down to share it for posterity, was she engaged in that process, and did she appreciate it?
She didn't. No, she wasn't interested, I don't think, in posterity. But I threw my weight around as best I could and got Surfer's Journal to finally do her profile piece on Joey. And it took way longer than it should have. And she had cancer, and the article came out about 6 months before she died. So she finally saw the article. She got the article when she was in hospice, in the hospital. And I know that, and it was like an 8-page, color story of Joey Hamasaki, and she was really stoked.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and the magazine was there on the bed, and I said, "Hey, what did your doctor say?" And she goes, "Oh, he was pretty." No one there knew who she was. She was literally the best female surfer if you're into style that there was for 4 or 5 years. And so I don't know. I don't know if that story's worth telling. I think it's worth telling because I suppose I'm always invested in the idea that surfing will take in the misfits of this world and allow them to have a place where they can be who they want to be and surf how they want to surf. And she had that. She had that for a few years, and then there was no money to be made. She was at Weber doing gloss coating for a while, and she's, 25, and I think she ended up, I think she was the school janitor in Honolulu for her whole life.
Wow.
So, but she had some great years, and she lived long enough in California that she and I would be able to connect on. She lived in San Clemente, 10 years before I got to San Clemente, and she had been there 10 or 15 years earlier. So we talked about surfing trestles, and we talked about, the shops and restaurants that we liked or whatever. And so we connected there a little bit, but she was like she was pretty checked out, and she was pretty quiet, but she loved that I called. I would always say, "Hey, Jody, it's Matt from Seattle." And she goes, "You don't have to say the Seattle part. I know it's you, Matt." Anyway.
Are there any modern surfers who interest you?
I'm going to say no, not because there aren't any, but because I'm not paying enough attention. So I don't feel like I'm giving the question enough time. I know you were going to. Can I jump ahead and say I know you were going to ask me. What was the question? The question about my favorite, not my favorite,
the best surfing you've ever seen. That's not where I was going right now, but absolutely, I was going to ask.
So I wanted to, because since we're so close to talking about Venice, I wasn't going to. I can't answer what or who the best surfer I've ever seen, but if I stay on that time frame from the Alan Sarlo dock, which was for me 69 to 74, it's like kind of that spot where I was just into it, and every day counted and every session counted. And I don't think Alan mentioned this, and it was interesting that he didn't. And I think they were friends. I know they were friends later. There was this very strange 2-year period. I don't know where he came from, but he came and suddenly he was there for 2 years. Was Darrick Doerner was in Venice.
That's right. Alan did tell me a lot about Darrick.
He did. Okay, so Darrick was probably 1 year younger than Alan, maybe the same year, and so 2 or 3 years older than me. And unlike Alan, Darrick, who was tiny at that time, Darrick allowed me to kind of hang out with him. And I was like a duckling. I imprinted on Darrick so hard that up until she died just a few years ago, my mom would turn to me and do her imitation of me imitating Darrick. Because I used to throw my chest out the way Darrick did. And there was this way of talking that Darrick did, like a sort of surf. And she would turn to me and say something to me when she was 80-something years old, where she was doing Darrick. And that was a thing with us for decades. And so that's how much I thought of Darrick Doerner. I literally, if I could have stayed, I would have slept, in his backyard just to hang out with Darrick. He was so cool. And he was such a good surfer. So Alan was a powerful guy early on. Darrick was small, nimble. And I think maybe I identified with the guys that were maybe closer to my size, because I was never going to be Alan Sarlo. Nobody was going to be. But I remember one of my favorite surfers as a kid also was Michael Ho, because Michael Ho might have been the only surfer alive who was good. It was my height, because he was tiny. And he got like 4th or 5th in the 72 World Contest, and I was just going, wow, he's a kid. And Darrick was like that. So Darrick was small. The thing that Darrick had over Michael Ho was he lived right up, lived 5 blocks from me. So I remember it didn't happen. It rarely happened. If you've ever driven the beaches at Venice and Santa Monica, it's just, it'll literally close out from pier to pier. And it's small, it's not powerful, and it's just a big, long closeout.
Right.
But in the winter, if there was enough huge storms and enough weirdness with the wind swell, whatever, there would be a sandbar. And there was once a sandbar just on the south side of Santa Monica Pier. Darrick and I ran from Bay Street because we could kind of see it capping out a little further. And Darrick had this white and yellow Blue Cheer surfboard. That was a brand in Santa Monica that was kind of cool. I might have had a Blue Cheer at that time too, but Darrick had a much cooler, better one. And we paddled out, and I watched Darrick take off on these waves that actually finally had shoulders, and he was able to go to the bottom and bank off the top and tuck down and go to the bottom and bank off the top. And I had never seen surfing like that in person. And it was just he and I out, and I was watching him do this with the Santa Monica Pier in the background. And I was 11 or 12, and as good as Alan was, and as good as Ronnie J was, and as good as so many surfers that I had been surfing with was, nothing impressed on me or blew my mind like Darrick did when he was 13.
Wow.
Yeah.
And was he already an established kind of surf star at that point?
Nothing. It wasn't even, he didn't even surf in the contests.
Okay.
Another thing that happened, I'd love to look this up. There was a huge earthquake in LA when I was in either, I think, 6th grade, maybe 7th grade. And I'm sure it was a headline earthquake because they called school off for the day, and it was in the wintertime. And they called school off, so we were stoked. Our house didn't fall down, and we went down to the beach, and it had nothing to do, of course, with the earthquake, but the surf was just giant, big winter swell, not clean. It was rough. It must have been wind on it the night before, and it was Venice Jetty. It's nothing that I wanted to know anything about. And it was nothing that even the big guys were. It was just big, rough, raw, gnarly. We're looking at it, and I see that Darrick is sitting out at the jetty by himself, way over. So the thing at the jetty that was cool is if the tide was low enough, who's sitting the deepest? Like if the tide was low enough and the sets were big enough, you could take off like literally on the other side of the jetty and ride right in front of it, which is insane because if you catch an edge, you're just going right into the rocks. And it was huge, and Darrick was sitting further out than I'd seen anybody else sit. And again, he's 13 or 14, and I don't know where he had not just the courage, but the patience. He just sat out there for at least 45 minutes while we were watching. Then he finally got this giant wave, rough, ragged, giant thing, rode it, straightened out, and went on the beach. Just got this one huge wave all by himself. And again, apart from that thing I was just saying where he was surfing so well, that was the other day that I go, wow. And then he was just gone. Like Darrick, I don't know where he went. He was only there for a couple of years. He left. We didn't keep in touch. And the next thing I knew, he was getting pictures. He got a really good cover shot, I think, on Surfer Magazine at sunset. Darrick was like a amazing sunset surfer before he became famous for being the Waimea surfer. It's like, oh, that's Darrick.
That's a great answer to the question of what's the best surfing you've ever seen.
Yeah, it was the one that got up into me the most.
Of course, yeah.
Because later on, when I was seeing Curran and everybody else, I'd already had my mind blown so many times.
Right. What's going on with the EOS? How's everything? Are you charging more than $3 a month now?
Yeah, David Lee. I went up to $5 last year. I know it's moving up. It's moving forward. It's the main thing would be that the second site that I've been thinking about and boring people about for 5 or 6 years is called EOS Archive, and it's going to be separate from EOS, and it's just going to be basically a digital library of Surf Guide magazine and Surfing Illustrated magazine and all those old surf books that are out of print, and all those old surf movies that are not digitized. And I want to just build a site, put everything on the shelves, have it all searchable. Unlike EOS, which is where I've curated everything, and the Sunday Joint gets you to the Sunday Joint is my invitation to you guys to come in and look at other stuff that I've curated or written. So EOS is kind of like my own personal scrapbook on surf history. The archive is just going to be a massive digital archive. There's no personality to it. I just want to see every issue of Surf Guide, and there they are, all 21 of them, from 63 to 65. So we've built it.
Wow.
It's beautiful. Well, the building part of it's just a giant database. It's just a searchable database.
Who's actually doing the scanning?
Sorry, let me back up. We've built the structure for it. So it's like we've built the library, we've built the thing, but your point is what I have to do. That's the next part, which is I have to find a partner, and then they have to partner. Then my partner who's going to administrate the thing, I think, needs to find partners with colleges, universities, and other orgs, and then we have a whole protocol for intaking all this stuff. So it has to be a group project. That's the next thing. It's a bigger project than EOS. It's a more important project, and I hate to say that because EOS is my thing, but the archive is actually the bigger, more important one. And that's what I'm going to be thinking about and focusing on this year.
Do you have the physical media, like the magazines themselves?
No, but Shaq does.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. And other people do. Once it becomes sort of global, people have that. Because I also want to be able to say, look, this is not just going to be Australian stuff and American stuff. There's a whole lot of Brazilian magazines that need to be uploaded. There's a whole lot of Japanese magazines that need it. And so somebody else needs to be, you give them the instruction manual for how to do the upload, and then it all comes into this sort of center point. Somebody checks it off, and it all goes up.
Okay.
It's pretty daunting, but
totally.
Yeah.
So we're talking magazines, print media.
Yep.
Films.
Yep.
And anything else?
Books.
And books.
Wow. And contest programs. And then eventually
contest programs.
Only because they're fun to look at. There's nothing much to see there, but like you look at those old Makaha contest programs, they're just a trip to look at to see who was in the events.
Yeah, I know. I agree. There's so many contests. Where do you put the limit on?
So I've in my own head, EOS is the Encyclopedia of 20th century surfing. So I've kind of put a hard stop there, at least in terms of what I'm working on. But EOS Archive, I think I would just start at I would go to Makaha International, I would go to the US Championships and just do the old ones. And it's never ending. I can't make myself think about how do you get to all of it. You do what I call a run, which is you say, let's go to Makaha International. The first one's 53, the last one's 71. We need to find somebody, a class of students somewhere who will take all of those programs and get them up. Then we're going to move on to Surf Guide. Then we're going to move on to Japan Surfing Life. So you take each one as a project within a project.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to hear about this, David. It's so boring. It's going to be so cool when it's up, and I'm going to need to get grant money, and I'm going to need to get more people to fund it. As a topic here, I would just rather talk about, surfing in dirty water in Venice. But
Let me tell you, I think it's more important now than ever. Like,
it is.
Surfing, obviously there was a COVID boom. And there's segments of the industry that are in recession now. Surfboards, certainly. Surfboard sales. But I still see a massive interest in surfing and a larger kind of, I don't know, more people doing it than ever before. And that means that it's more important to have these sort of archiving projects complete for all of those people to be able to access information.
The thing that keeps me wanting to do that is almost out of anger or out of determination to not let surfing become a thing that's done in a wave pool.
Yes.
Or to let surfing become a thing that's defined by competition. It's so not. And I've always said, and it's not a old guy talking, the only thing that counts, the only thing that makes the sport interesting or different or unique is that we get to go in the ocean to do it. And the ocean will determine when we do it. The ocean will say it's, the ocean gets us sort of out there and get to this place or to that place, or it takes us all over the place. And the ocean is what defines the sport. And I have to take deep breaths all the time to think that we're going to WSL is going to Abu Dhabi for a contest, and I don't know, whatever pool Mick Fanning's supporting, whatever new pool Kelly's doing, whatever new, it just makes me kind of insane that. And the fact is that the thing that got me excited to go surf with Jay in the world's worst waves on the north side of Santa Monica Pier is still like that. Whatever attracted me to that is still what I think counts to attract people to surfing right now, whatever age they are.
Yeah.
And well, it gets hard to it starts to get hard to remember that sometimes. And I think I can do that with in history of surfing and Encyclopedia of Surfing and the Sunday Joint and these things where it's not just me saying, oh, it was so bitching back then. If I can do something that's sort of current day and letting everyone sort of know that this was a weird, fun, unique, sort of crippling thing to do. It always has been, and it always will be, and it happens in the ocean. And that's what's so wonderful, but also confounding about it. Great, that's what it is.
I come from the same school of thought. I agree with everything you just said, but I also am apprehensive to say that my surf experience is the way that everybody else needs to get into it. If some kid finds it in a wave pool in Texas, I'm okay with that.
Absolutely.
However, there is a history that exists, and so much of that history or the people involved in it are still alive.
Right.
And so we have an opportunity now to chronicle it, to archive it, to make it available for everybody who does, even if they get into it through a wave pool in Texas.
Absolutely.
They can still tap into
But the person who's getting into a wave pool in Texas then realizes that there's all these waves to go surf. That person should go read Vicki Flaxman's interview about what it was like at Malibu, because they're going to get to a beach someday and it's going to be them and some friends in sleeping bags and a fire, and they know the surf's coming up for the next day. And that's going to be an experience identical to what Vicki did when she and her friends got in the car and went to San Onofre for the weekend, and they're on the beach. So that's, and I don't know why it matters so much that those things connect, but it really, as I get older, the fact that there's a through line to it seems to make a huge difference. It just feels like, oh, there it is. It's all solid, and that's why we all did it.
Well, you're thankfully gifted or oriented in a way that can actually do the archiving. It bothers me that it doesn't already exist, and the arbiters like the WSL have done such a poor job.
Right.
I had a listener this year send me Tom Curran's listing on the WSL site, and it does not acknowledge any of his world titles, and the only the results it showed was him in 33rd place at a recent event that he got something gifted into, like a wild card into or something.
Right.
So it's like, there's nowhere else other than the Encyclopedia of Surfing as a authoritative source for the new kid who learned about it in Texas, who wants to learn about Tom Curran. It would make logical sense that he'll end up on the WSL site as the authority on the sport.
Right.
And they pull up Tom Curran's listing, and it shows that he only got 33rd sometime, but he's not a 3-time world champ.
Right.
Like, it makes me insane.
Or for that matter, if you don't really want to get only clips of Tom Curran surfing in contests. As good as it was, totally. That's not what you really want to see.
So I think the kid is savvy enough who does go through that experience to realize, oh, this isn't all of Tom. So they end up on YouTube. Maybe they find searching for Tom Curran or whatever, and they have their own journey.
Right.
But I think that there is value for there to be obviously an authoritative. Right. And so that's why the archive project, I'm behind it. I'll try to get money your way in any way that I can. I'll allocate some time to archiving some stuff for you. Get some
David.
Interns.
All right. Well, we'll have to get all of the Surf Splendors on there too.
Exactly.
How many have you done now?
538. I
just want to say something before we go, which is you've done really good for your second pod for the day. You performed well.
Often I go longer on the second one. It's not all pent up. Wait a second before we go. I've made you sit through sponsor ads with Manscaped and various things in the past.
I won't talk about that again, but go ahead.
No, well, I'm going to make up for it by gifting you something really special.
Is it chocolate?
No, it's even better. VAER is our watch sponsor.
No way.
VAER, VAER Watches. And they wanted you to have this. And they're actually in Venice. Believe it or not.
Does the V stand for something in Venice?
No, I don't think so.
That's beautiful.
But there is your American assembled, waterproof, guaranteed timepiece. These are two guys who are surfers who are doing the direct-to-consumer model, and they're assembling them in the U.S. They've got it all like kind of the...
This is gorgeous.
The watch market was so dominated by conglomerates for a long time, and you get low quality for a high price, basically. These guys are high quality, American made, incredible materials, and they're great.
I love it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Nice.
So, also, final question. Do you ever envision on moving on to a different cocktail? You've been on Manhattans for years.
So I had my first beer at, I can say this, no one's going to care. It's statute of limitations is up. I had my first beer at 16.
Okay.
And because of my Venice upbringing that we were talking about earlier, so the first time I ever got high was at one of my parents' parties. My brother and I are upstairs watching TV. I'm just going, fuck. They're so loud. I just wanted my dad and his party and my mom and their party to be quiet. We're up there trying to watch TV. We're trying to watch All in the Family or something. And I'm just kind of pissed off. And then one of my dad's friends comes in the room, and I was 8, Chris was 6. And he goes, "Hey, little guys." And he got us stoned. 8 and 6 years old, right?
Wow.
This was Venice 68. He's lit one up, gave it to us.
8 and 6?
So this was actually a line that my parents they found out later and they weren't thrilled with. This was a little young. But what I remember is that, and his name was Phil, and he left, and I turned to Chris and I go, "Are you high?" And he goes, "No." And I go, "I don't think I am either." And I don't remember if I was high. I might have gotten high, but for me anyway, that was, so I got high occasionally in, 5th, 6th, 7th grade. Never liked it. Had my first beer at 16, and I really enjoyed. I feel like I'm breaking all kinds of. I'm being inappropriate in so many ways, but I always did like a drink. I've never been an alcoholic, but I always liked to drink. But beer was my drink for decades, and I had a bet with my mom at one point. She says, "When are you going to start drinking wine?" I was like, I was probably almost 30, and I said, "I'm never going to drink wine. I just like beer." And I have a photo of me 2 years later giving her $20 because we made a bet, shaking hands, and that we're both holding a glass of wine. So then I drank wine. Then I moved on to the Manhattan when I married Jody. And I've just gone back to white wine. So this is the first Manhattan I've had. Yeah. And why is because I am such a lightweight now, So one Manhattan is good, but at home I can have 1.5 glasses of wine. I can kind of make it last longer.
Gotcha.
Do you have a problem with the Manhattan?
I like the Manhattan. I just, I've evolved. I go through a phase where I like a particular cocktail, but it doesn't last more than a year.
Where are you at now?
Negroni.
That's what Jody's drinking these days.
Yeah.
Yeah. She went from gin and tonic to Negroni.
Yeah. And in a certain environment or occasion, I will do a martini, like gin, dirty martini.
Right.
It's a classic. So I've been doing that for years, but it's not a nightly thing, you know, or even a weekly thing. It's a special occasion thing. But I've known you to drink a Manhattan for years now. But that's your go-to cocktail.
But that's
I'm okay if you stick with it for the rest of your life. I was just curious.
My MO has always been I will find something and ride it way past when I should have given up.
Oh, okay.
So I probably won't do it with Manhattans because I'm kind of every now and then I'll allow myself a Manhattan. I like having a Manhattan with you just feels like I would do this every year until it's over. I will fly to Florida to do this.
Yeah, sweet. Well, we'll do it. Who knows when the next time will be, but I'm down anytime you're down.
Okay, I haven't done a podcast since the last one we did, so I feel like you're kind of my ride or die.
Well, you've gotten a lot more comfortable at it.
Thanks.
So that's good.
All right.
Thanks, man.
All right, thank you.
Surf Splendor.